Hi ZiRD, we are having a guest here, which is ZiRD, who will be known for many people already and who is a very well accomplished tournament player, has played many seasons already. Maybe ZiRD, introduce yourself a little bit. How long have you been in the tournament scene already? What are your main accomplishments so far?
Since forever, basically. I think training rooms came in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. I've been playing since then. But my first actual tournament, like pro one that I played, was the 2018 spring season, which I played and won. That was nice. A good start, winning your first competitive tournament. That's probably my biggest accomplishment, since there was also an offline following that, which was definitely a great experience. And then I've also won a summer season in 2021, a summer season in 2022, and a lot of top 4 places overall. I think I counted to 13 or 14 top 4s. So,
yeah, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
And do you know how many there have been in total?
No idea.
Oh, but
I think I've been in at least 75 to 80% of the total amount.
Yeah. All right. The first one, let me just maybe get to the very start there. You said the first one was still in training rooms, not even the tournament system that we know from the game nowadays.
I mean, they used to organize the top 4s in training rooms instead of having them in game. I think they still do though for major seasons like the Blitz Cups. It's all hosted in training rooms. But back in the day, you didn't have tournaments. You only had training rooms. Back when it first started, so you didn't actually have tournaments to play, but you still trained. You gathered players, you played trainings. So essentially, you were training for nothing until the first Twister Cup was announced in 2016. But funnily enough, I had quit the game at that point. I had taken a break for 3-4 months. I didn't even know there was a Twister Cup until after I came back from my break.
Actually, that's a little bit how I started as well, that I was I was playing on PC and wanted to get into tournaments, but no real tournament team would take me as a PC player, of course. So I just played for fun in training rooms. But let's maybe get to the start of tournaments for you personally. How did you get into tournaments?
I mean, it started with just playing, as I said, in the training rooms. I played in good teams back then. I mean, teams are teams, there weren't really teams. There was just a bunch of players playing together. But I started playing with the Legion guys back when training rooms came out. Mm-hmm. The same guys that went to the 2016 Twister. So Thomas, NG, all of those old guys, they've been gone for many years now.
Yes. Sometimes I still see one or the other online, but in tournaments, they are long gone.
Yeah.
And any of the others still playing from that time?
No, there's not many people left around. The people that I can think of that are still at a high competitive level that played around let's say 2017, 2018 would be Object Free, for example.
Yeah.
He's been around forever as well. But apart from that, there's not that many people. Winch as well has been around since 2018-ish. Da Silva. But I mean, apart from that, there's not many top players. I mean, also the scene has changed a lot. A lot of the top European players have been replaced by top CIS players now.
Yes.
A lot of new players on the server, for the past 2 to 3 years. Yeah. There's so many Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian players now that weren't here before. So they definitely, I would even say they make up a majority of the top 8 players.
But probably 50% at this point.
I think even more.
In the last few top 8 tournaments, we had at least we had 4 of the top 8 tournaments, Ukrainian, Russian speaking as well there. But generally also the competitive scene evolved a lot in that we're having a lot more people playing it nowadays, right? And I think getting into tournaments at this point is a lot harder than back when you started playing, right?
It is. It's a lot harder.
What do you feel does it take to get started with tournaments?
Now it's a lot harder compared to before. I mean, honestly, back then, you had strictly 4 good teams, sometimes only 3 good teams. Now you have 10 good teams.
Yep.
Of course, there's still the top tier teams, APA, for example, who are always good, always perform. But, a lot of these teams before, they were like always easy games, you know. Back in the day, like basically you always knew. I'm just gonna say like this, like in 2018, 2020, 2021, like I knew I would be in top four. I was in top four every season. I think I had like a consecutive run of like 8-9 top fours because it was so easy back then. But now it's a lot harder. Like there's so many good teams. Like you see how it shifts. Like you see B-Love won, I think 3 or 4 seasons back to back, and then now they've not even made the top four twice in a row. Like that's the level. And also Appa had a really competitive run before. Then they also missed out. They missed out on top 8, I think, one season. But that was a weird format. The one in winter this year where they lost to Serenity. There was a massive shootout on Ghost Factory. I remember that game. The light died in like 20 seconds.
Oh yes, I see. I remember.
Yeah.
Yes.
but yeah, I'm just saying, like really good teams still miss out on top spots now.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you still see some upwards movements of players and also teams throughout the top 8, which have been pretty bad or not on the highest level a couple seasons ago?
Definitely, 100%, 100%. There's so many players now that personally, I would say if you asked me a few years ago, I'd say yeah, those guys are bad. But they're now top players. Like they won seasons. They're constantly at the top. I mean, of course, there's going to be a power change. Like as I said, like back when I started, there's not many of those players left that still play at a high level. Maybe 3 to 5, including myself, that have been around since like 2017, 2018. So obviously, there's going to be new players to come up and take those positions. I mean, a lot of people have quit, but a lot of people also weren't able to stay at a high level, and therefore either went into worse teams or just quit the game as they didn't find it enjoyable anymore to not compete. So there's definitely a lot of good new players, 100%.
On the one hand, it's noticeable that the very top teams have a lot of players among them which have been around for years already. But at the same time, as you're saying, there's still the possibility to reach higher levels if you are consistent and keep going there. I think that's good to hear to the newer players who are maybe watching this then.
I mean, yeah, of course. Like some players have been playing for a long time and are just now reaching their peaks. I think one really, really fair example of someone who's really actively climbed to the top is Uni from Up. Like he's made insane progress. Like I remember when he started out in First Alliance and then he was in Loka, and right now I think with the legacy he has right now, he's the best caller ever in EU.
Yeah, the games that APA is playing at this point are just really, really dominant. It's great to see them. Actually, I find it interesting as well that you kept going, even though you had some good times, some bad times. I think most others would have quit at some point. Actually, I mean, most are like just winning a couple of seasons and then they are kind of out of the game, not really having the interest anymore. And you still felt like continuing your journey. What kept you going? It was not the big cups, apparently, right?
I mean, delusion. No, but I enjoy the game. I enjoy competing, and I've taken breaks. Like I've skipped a season here and there, but every time I do skip a season, I always feel like fuck. I should have. Oh, sorry. I always feel like I should have played the season, like because I miss competing. Like when you're good at something, like when you're good at a game, like this is a hobby for me. Like, and it's fun to actually be competitive at something. So if I have the chance, then why not take it? I mean, might as well do this than like play maybe another game that I'm not that good at, and then it's just kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, so I think that's it's not only about the main prizes there, but also just about a lot of the other aspects about it. You had a lot of people that you consistently played with multiple seasons in a row as well, right? So a couple of friends, I guess, at this point as well. I think you have like mostly there is a team which has a core of multiple players, as you do have as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's usually the same few guys, and then the other players switch around a little bit. But I've been playing with, for example, F for I think 4 years now. nearly every season. I've been playing with Ghosty for a long time. I also played with Daniel for a long time. We don't play together anymore, but we used to. So I think it's also, you can make friends that you play together with. I mean, of course, it's not fun to sit with 6 strangers and play. I mean, of course, you're going to want to have friends as well. Like, you laugh, you have fun when you play. I think that's a big part of it as well.
So does it even work to play with people who you're not too familiar with?
I mean, it works. It depends on what you mean with not that familiar. Because
I mean, sometimes you're not necessarily friends with the others, but you know they are like best players. And does it work to just go for some patchwork of the best players, or is it better to just play with a team that you really enjoy playing with?
It's a hard question, because I think it can work. Like, you don't have to be best friends with everyone. I've had teams like that before where I didn't really like my teammates that much, but we still won. So, I mean, it can work, but obviously if you can also have good vibes and really good players, that's the best outcome. But honestly, I feel in most cases, vibes are more important than players. There's been a lot of, like, whatever you would say, super teams that have gathered like 7, 8, 9 very, very good players. They slap together a team and then they just fail massively because they don't really like each other's egos clashing and such. I've had that experience as well, so I would know.
Have you also been in a situation where you founded a team or created a team yourself or played in other existing teams?
Overall, it's mostly teams that I build myself or have been built around me. Like in the BPS era, we kind of had me as the team leader, and then the roster was built around who I was able to get, who I wanted, I guess you could say. But apart from that, like what I've been now, I am in Aqua, I've been in R2K. Those were both my own clans. So yeah, it's just kind of me trying to get whatever I can to stay competitive.
What do you think is important about getting a team together?
Obviously, you're going to want players who have good availability. Like, you need people who will be there, who you can trust, who's reliable. So good availability. You want players with good vibes. You don't want anyone with a massive ego or someone like, as soon as you start losing, they start complaining, like crying, trying to find things to blame the losses on instead of just, continuing and playing the game. I think that's really important. You need a good mix of personalities if you want to have a team that lasts for a long time. Like, if you don't mind going like from team to team, people to people in every season, then sure, like do whatever you want. But if you want to consistently play with the same group of people, I think it's really important to have a good mix of personalities.
Yeah, I noticed that quite often, either on teams that I played on or teams that I expected. There are a couple of people who are really talkative and who are just announcing who to focus for and stuff like that. And there are others which are just good at farming and who are just filling the gaps, basically. Doesn't work to have too many of either of them.
I think it's bad to have too many people speaking, but it's also bad to have too many quiet players.
Yeah,
I'd say it's definitely worse to have too many quiet players, though, because even though it can get messy with too many people speaking, at least you know exactly what's going on. Because I've played with people that don't really speak much, and sometimes they would end up in a bad position and they wouldn't like communicate it. Like, they would just peacefully sit there and wait to die, and they wouldn't tell anyone. So you were just kind of unaware of what was going on, and then they're geting pushed, they're dead, and you're like, oh yeah, we just lose. Nice. No game plan. So I'd rather have a team of people talking constantly than a team of people that are not really vocal.
I think that's also something to just point out here at this point already. Like, communication is so important in tournaments, telling others what is actually going on. It's such a huge difference to random games where you're just playing for yourself, basically, maximum having one platoon mate with you. Let's maybe get back to the question, what are core skills that a tournament player needs?
The most important thing, availability, I think. Yeah. Like, it's not really a skill, but you need to be able to make the time. That's the thing. Like, so, if you're going to want to compete at a high level, first of all, you need to have the time, because you can't go in and say like, yeah, I'm available 3 nights every week, because no top team will want a player who's available 3 nights a week. That's just the reality. Like, you'll want someone who can play 6 times a week if needed. Like, of course, maybe if you have one busy day, of course, yeah, you can come this particular day, fine. But, you know, during seasons, like the one we had now, we played like, what, 7-8 days in a row? Like, you need people who you know will come on those days. That's the thing. You can't rely on people and then they don't show up.
Yeah.
So availability is, for me, probably the most important, I wouldn't call it a skill, but factor. Apart from that, being vocal is great. Obviously, having good individual skill, having a brain of your own. Like, it's really, having a brain of your own, I could call it. Like, you want a player who thinks for himself. You know, not someone that you need to babysit. Someone who you need to tell to, you need to drive 20 meters forward, or you need to turn and look left. Like, you want people who are able to micromanage themselves and think for themselves. And obviously, you don't want someone who randomly makes a move that loses you the game, but you want people who know what they're doing. So you don't have to. You can think of your own gameplay as well, because that's a downside of being a caller for a team. Often your own gameplay becomes worse if you have to focus too much on your teammates.
Yes.
I mean, it's much easier to just look in front of yourself, focus on your own tank, and shooting at the red tanks. But if you constantly have to tell your teammates how they should play, then you lose focus on yourself. You bleed some HP. You don't really do the moves that you want to do yourself, and then all of a sudden you're playing bad.
Yeah, totally. It's calling for a team and telling them what to do. That takes a lot of attention away, of course. So you're focusing, maybe let's try to just explain a bit for rather beginners. So what is the responsibility of a caller for you, and what's the responsibility of a player then?
I mean, the responsibility of a caller, it's team dependent though. Like, so, yeah, of course, all teams have different ways of doing things, but to put it simply, the responsibility of the caller is to lead the games, like have a plan, have a direction of where to go, be able to think of relocations, how to play the game, adapt depending on like the lineup of the enemy team. Like, you can't go in with only one idea in your mind and then you see a lineup that potentially will counter your idea, and you just go into a death trap. So you need a game plan. And then you need to be able to speak, tell your teammates how to do things. You need to think fast, because if you think slowly, especially now in current meta, you will lose. Like, sometimes you have to take a gamble, you have to risk. You can't always know what's right 10 out of 10 times, because if you knew what was right, everyone would do it in every season. So it's not that simple. And then organizing the team, making sure that everyone is available, everyone comes on time, like when you schedule trainings. Also for tournament, like, just make sure that you have players available so you don't have any unfortunate incidents.
Yeah. And the players then, they, of course, as you mentioned already, they don't only execute what you're telling them to do, but they're also doing some stuff on their own. I think that's sometimes a little bit underrated. That I've heard some opinion that tournaments are just about throwing tanks at each other, but it's much more than that, right?
Of course, yeah. I mean, if you watch the games, you will see how much difference small little moves make. Like, one small move will change the entire battle, like taking one hull down position to counter a flank, or moving to a certain position to spot a line. Like, all of those small things changes the entire outcome of the game. Like, of course, if both teams drive 7 tanks versus 7 in the first minute of the game, then it's just a YOLO push from both sides, nothing really interesting. But it's really in those like long, like 4 or 5 minute battles where the teams are relocating, taking different positions, spotting. That's when you see skill, I would say.
Yeah. I think at a higher level, then it's much more about what you're saying there. And at a lower level, it is often about just keeping the hit points on the field in the first place. It's often the main problem there, that the teams die too quickly and don't have the option to do some moves in the end anymore.
I mean, at the lower level, I feel like the more important things for those players is just to have good focus fire, pen your shots, organize yourself as a team, don't push by yourself, push as a unit. Like, I think you obviously have to work your way up with moves, because obviously when you're at a lower level, it's harder to organize a team properly and do like higher level moves, so to speak.
Yep. We already touched a bit the training process. How does it work? Like, what kinds of trainings do you do? How do you prepare for a season?
Sorry, I have a cough. Yeah. I mean, mostly we train against opposing teams, like just casual 7 versus 7 trainings against the teams who we know we will be competing against. Like, usually you don't want to waste your time by playing against teams who are a lot worse than you. So usually you try to train against like the top 10, 12 teams of the server and get as many good sets in as possible without revealing as much info as about yourself as possible. Because obviously you don't want to show all your cards in training. You want to keep some for the tournaments when it matters. But yeah, you train against competitors, you think about how to improve, you check your mistakes. Usually we record every single training we have as well, with voice chat, so we can look back at that. We can listen to maybe there was a missed call, maybe there was something that wasn't communicated, and we can just check the overview of the battles as well, which is a nice thing. We don't really do that much of like 4v4, 5v5 trainings. I know a lot of teams does that as well. And it can be. It's really beneficial. I mean, there was a period where we did strictly only like 4v4s, and it can be beneficial. But personally, I just prefer playing against other teams as it's more fun. I easily get bored of playing like 4v4.
Yeah, I guess from a tactical perspective, of course, the 4v4 is not that interesting. It's more about the individual focus fire and communication than maybe.
Yeah, it's about like knowing your teammates better, I would say.
You even mentioned you were just keeping some strats secret before the tournament, so you never get to actually play the main strategies of the top 4 tournament.
You do, but it's just you kind of know the opponents which you won't play in the top 4, you know. So you're not going to throw maybe your main strategies that you want to play in the final stage against the teams that you personally think will be like top 3 teams. You rather train them against teams who you think maybe like top 10, top 8, top 6 level teams. So, you know, you can at least attempt to keep them secret. I mean, obviously, it's good to be able to train your strats, because if you don't train it at least once, then you won't be able to see if there's any improvements. And sometimes, I mean, you don't see any improvements even if you train it once, because you may play against a completely different strategy later. So, I mean, it's always a bit of a gamble with strats, because you never know what you're going to play into.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, 2 teams might have completely opposing strategies that are either mirrored or just perfect counter strats to another. Yep. It's always very tricky then in the tournaments. In the tournament itself, does the approach to the game somewhat change than compared to the trainings?
I think, yeah. In trainings,
qualification as well.
I mean, qualifications like in this format are a bit more competitive, especially now since you may play a really like competitor to you, a top 4, top 6 team in the final stage. So obviously you focus hard for those games. But training, I mean, obviously it's different. Like on training, you're going to try some more things. Like you don't care that much about the score. Like you care more about limit testing. Like trying what you can do and what you can't do. And sometimes some people may do very risky stuff and lose your games. But, you know, it doesn't really matter in trainings. I feel like everything is just more tense in tournaments. Everyone is focused in another way. Like, you don't really want to be the one who makes the main mistake to lose the game, so everyone plays a bit more safe, while in training, you know, it's a bit more YOLO. And sometimes it works really well with a bit more YOLO, but people are scared of trying that in tournaments. For obvious reasons, because you don't want to be the one who costs your team the game.
Of course, it always needs the perfect adjustment there, how much aggression you put in and not putting in too much aggression at the same time. Needs a lot of trust among the teammates as well. Let's maybe move on to what you are training, meaning the meta that you are playing, and also how the meta evolved. I've just watched a couple of streams yesterday. Still, the first tournaments were very different still, right, than they are today. How do you feel about this progress there?
You mean in terms of meta?
Yeah.
I mean, the original, if we're talking way back, that was like the Object 140 meta. So it was a fast-paced medium meta, but this is like 2016, so decades ago, almost. But I mean, now recently you've had the Type 71 meta, you've had the Stridsvagn meta, you've had the T100 LT meta. No, I really like the current meta, actually. I feel like you're offered a lot of versatility now. Before, I feel like you were kind of forced into one corner where you had to play the very strong tank to be able to compete. Like when it was the Stridsvagn meta, you had to play the Stridsvagn. When it was the Type 71 meta, you had to play the Type 71. When it was the VC113 GFT meta that we thankfully just got out of, you had to play the WZ113G. Like there was no other choice. You don't play it, then you probably lose because the tank just has so many more advantages compared to the other tanks.
Yes. Yeah.
But right now you have a wide variety of tanks that you can play. The E50M is very good. The T100 LT is very good. The FP25B is very good. MLE very good. Then there's a couple of like mid-tier tanks who can also be really good depending on how you play, like the Super Conqueror, the Concept, I would say. Maybe the E6 now with the PBR model. We got a bit of a buff to the cupola, which is quite nice. So I feel like you have more options now. You can play a more diverse play style. Like you're not forced into one corner where you just need to play a certain set of tanks.
I really like this about the current meta as well. Mostly, otherwise we had like 2, maximum 3 different tanks on the field. Sometimes even seven of the same tank, like 7 Mouses or so, 7 Type 71, 7 Stridsvagens. Thinking back about the first season that I've seen yesterday was the 2018 season. It was still very, very campy. We had like 3 different TDs on either side, people staring at each other for 3 minutes or so before anyone was moving.
Yeah.
And that changed a lot then. People obviously learn how to play the game. Is it just a progress of the meta, or did people really get to know the tournaments better?
I think it's both, I would say. Like you have more understanding of the game, but you also have more understanding of how to play tournaments. Like back then, I mean, I played back then, so I would know. Like we had good seasons in 2018, and I was really comfortable in this old slow meta. Like I remember I played my IS4 every game, and I would just drive into a base at some point of the game, and that was it. But you know, you had like the Object 268, the Mouses, the IS4s, these like slow tanks, like that aren't really able to relocate much, and all you did was like sneak into some caps, and then you sat there and you stared. If you didn't have the caps, then you just had to drive in and stop them at the end.
Yeah,
but now you're not allowed that anymore. That's the thing, because now when I feel like the players have also improved, and that's one of the reasons that the meta is so much faster. Because if you don't take map control at the start, then you just lose. Like you need to be able to control at least like 40 to 50% of the map, or in 70-80% of the battles you just lose. Because back then you didn't care about map control, you cared about points. You could have like a 2-tick, like 10 points cap lead, and you would be happy. You'd be like, yeah, we're winning this. Everyone just sit back, 6 tanks preempt the cap, and we wait.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, no one's just holding the cap advantage anymore. People are, at least if they are only having 1 cap, they are still rotating and pushing into the enemies. Apart from some very rare cases, only if there are 2 or 3 caps on one side while the enemy only has 1 cap, then no one's moving anymore.
Yeah. Because you know that your 20, 30, 40 point cap lead doesn't matter anymore. Like, you know that the enemy team will do something, and you can't just be the one sitting and waiting, because you'll most likely end up losing. Even if you try to build up like a good hold, most likely when you just like stick to one base, you get kind of stuck, if you know what I mean. Like if you want to defend only 1 cap, you kind of box yourself into a corner while you let the enemy team just kind of slowly take control of the map, and then you sit there and wait for your inevitable death. Of course, if you have like 2 bases, you can be more comfortable defending it because it ticks a lot faster. Like the difference is huge. Like you win twice as fast. So, you know, you can feel a bit more comfortable defending bases for 1.5 minutes than you do defending 1 base for 3 minutes. And also when you only have a 1 base lead, like one of your tanks dies and then the lead shifts to them in most cases.
Yep.
So I think most teams now rely on, even if you have the points, you have to be ready for your next move. Like, you want to be the one making the move. You don't want to wait for your enemy to make the move. Because let's say you cap base A, you know that your enemy team would either come for you in base A or they will go for base B. An enemy team has, let's say, base C. So then most likely what you want to do is you want to prepare and already send your tanks towards base C to prepare for when your enemy will go to base A. So basically what you do is you constantly like try to change sides, or you try to catch them off guard. Like, let's say they start slowly rotating towards your cap, but they keep maybe 1-2 tanks on the other side. You try to kill those 1-2 tanks and cap their base and get the advantage.
It's basically there are only two options. Like, either you hold the cap or you take a cap on the other side. And yeah, we have moved away from holding the caps, and also just the passive strategies of sitting behind there. They don't really seem to work out anymore, since people can just easily move into the cap and then they stop it and you have to re-push again. And if you're not in position, it won't work out anymore. So,
and I feel like one of the great things that impact that is also the tanks with reactive armor.
Yeah, that as well.
Like, if you cap a base with reactive armor, you survive for so long. That's the thing. Like, you have an MLE with 2,800 HP. I think it has. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or 2,750 maybe. Yeah. But yeah, and then he goes into the base, he presses reactive, and he gets an effective, 3.5k HP. Like, of course, you're not... If you go with 3 MLEs into stopping a base, you won't be able to kill them. You won't be able to decap them. Like, you can't do anything. They will take the base away from you, and since they have reactive, they won't even lose that much HP. So that's why you have to always like be proactive and ready, because you have to keep in mind those tanks are also fast. It's not like you're waiting for mouses to come to you that are driving like 20-25 kilometers an hour, but you're waiting for the MLEs who drive like 45 kilometers per hour. So it doesn't take them that long to relocate.
Yeah. Yeah, we had multiple such metas where it was all about the special consumables for a while already, right? It's actually not been that long ago that they've been introduced, maybe 2 years or so.
Oh, the special consumables have been around for a longer time than that. I remember reactive in 2020.
Okay, yeah. Time goes by.
I think that's when the 215B and E5 had reactive. I think that was 2020 Blitz Cup.
Yeah, something like that.
2019 Blitz Cup, even.
Oh.
yeah, it's forever ago.
Yeah,
I think that was the time reactive came. And super speed boost as well. I think they came around the same time.
Yeah, first FV, E5. We had the FV meta first, then came E5 meta. Then I don't know, later on came Kranwagen meta, which also has speed boost and reticle calibration.
Yeah, and then they also added the tungsten. I think tungsten came with the 60 TP, right? Which was also meta for like one season.
Yeah, I'm not too sure anymore, but yeah. The 60 TP, of course, with the tungsten rounds also played a big role later on VK72. Kind of similar playstyle then. We could see a lot of movement there from some faster metas to some very, very heavy metas. Some years ago we had like super heavy meta of Mouses, VK72s, 60 TPs, right? Then we had some fairly fast metas as well with the T100 LT. What do you personally prefer?
Right now, I would say I prefer playing the faster metas, because I would say I trust my teammates to play well in the faster metas. Because if you play the slower metas, it can be hard. Like, even against teams that, let's say, aren't on your level, you could struggle, because, if they get a really good hold and they manage to get the bases, then in slower metas, it's hard to retake the bases. But in metas where you have like more mobile, more squishy tanks, then it's easier to retake the bases, as in this meta that we have right now. So I think I prefer the meta where you're able to move a bit faster rather than teams just sitting still. Like the last meta with the WZ113Gs, you didn't have much movement, you just had teams waiting for you. So this is definitely more enjoyable to play.
I've also heard a team say that with the VZ meta, they could be playing quite well, but as soon as the meta got faster, they were like, okay, we're not going to be able to keep up on the same level anymore.
Yeah, because it's harder, naturally. Like, you need to move more, you need to think more. I mean, obviously, it requires more skill. Like, when you just have to sit, obviously, yeah, you have to be good to play in the VC meta as well, but you don't have to be as good as playing tanks that are proactive.
Yeah, the more aggressive it gets, the more quick decisions you have to make. You have to constantly decide where to go next, who to focus next, where do I hide now? Do I have the chance to hide, or are my teammates already dying? So much stuff going on at the same time. It's always very lovely to see them when you've got multiple pushes going on, and even when seeing it from above, from the bird's eye perspective, as I'm in mostly, you don't really have a great overview who's actually winning. There's so much chaos then.
Yeah, I think like right now in this meta, there's a lot of fight on two sides at the same time.
Yeah.
Like you will have the 50Ms fighting on one side, you'll have the MLEs, Kongs, 215Bs on one side, and then you'll have teams trying to maybe go through the middle. You'll have some random MLE 1v1 or something. So yeah, there's a lot going on right now. It's definitely not one-sided fights as it was in the last meta, because last meta, you kind of stacked all your tanks kind of close together and you fought as 7 versus 7, but now it's really split.
I think that's also just most of the game plan for a team, that they are just pushing the center with some tanks to fight for a cap. As soon as one team is pushing for the center, the other team is also pushing for the center. And then there is a second fight going on for one cap, like on the side, to still try to maybe win both sides or win one side, or just get the cap control at least. So
I mean, that summarizes it really well. Like, based on the trainings we played, yeah, that's how the games are in a lot of situations. Like, you take the middle, you take one flank, and then you try to survive as long as possible on one flank and try to kill the other. Like, if you have like MLEs in the middle, they're outnumbered, you just try to run around in circles and delay them from killing you, and you try to run over the other side and then help the middle, or vice versa.
Yeah. I think, actually, I really feel like this also changed that we don't really have the teams just pushing 7 tanks into each other that much anymore, and just a lot of, especially on the higher level, a lot of pushes simultaneously, and that's of course a masterclass then when everyone's moving, and you as a caller can probably also not really have much of a say then anymore. You depend on the teammates to do the right moves as well.
Yeah, calling is definitely not the same as it was back like 4, 5, 6 years ago, because the teams were a lot more dependent on you as the caller, as people weren't really moving that much. But now when you're in those good teams, like you have a lot of people speaking. Like in the current team I'm playing in right now, we have me and then like 2 more players with calling experience, plus 2 more very vocal players as well. So I don't really like I make the big decisions, like push here, relocate here, this, but a lot of the times people can do just fine communicating themselves.
I guess you would probably not even consider a player who's not on voice chat, right? Or who's
No,
muted.
of course not. No, of course not.
Yeah, sometimes I've experienced that on lower level teams, especially like some people just muted or half the team muted, and that just doesn't work anymore when you're getting to the higher level then.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. Like, as I said before, like back in the good old times, like you'd have someone play alone on a flank and they'd be in a bad position. And, if they're muted, they won't tell you anything. Or like, if they're a really shy, not talkative person, they don't give you the info you need. And then you lose a tank and then it's already too late to think about your next move.
Maybe another thing about the server merge and also the meta. Did the server merge impact the meta, in your opinion?
I think, yeah. I think the CIS teams that came here, and a lot of CIS players, not just CIS teams, but I mean, all of these top teams now have CIS players. Like we have CIS players, APA has CIS players, QQ has CIS players. And then the other top teams are essentially CIS teams, like Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian teams. So definitely, I think the addition of the CIS players made the game a lot faster. Because I remember like the first season, all the teams started coming over from the Russia server. You had like the pink team who played on EU. They didn't make it into top 4, but I remember they played a really like fast, aggressive game style. They'd show up with like 4 lights or something, and that was really hard to play against. You'd also have like the teams like B-Love, who is made out of a lot of the core of G game. I think they have 5 or 6 G game players in their team. So them coming over. I mean, we also had Ufbinyaj, he's been playing on EU. You have the caller of Zombie, Nikita Reborn Win, who's playing in APA. Vinograd, who's playing in QQ, who's also been on an offline, I'm pretty sure. Like all of these like high profile players coming over from like the Rue server to EU will definitely have an impact on the game. And I think that punished a lot of the slower teams. Like the faster moving teams, like you had to kind of adapt to their style, and I think that helped evolving our meta. Because if you look at the other servers, you will see a very, very, very big difference in how EU plays. Like,
No.
I'm just gonna say this: I think Joker on NA are the only very, very, very good team outside of the European server right now in Blitz. Because Joker play a very good game style, and we also played a lot of like cross-server trainings with them. I respect how they play a lot. But apart from that, I don't think the other teams are able to keep up on the level that's on EU right now. I think most other teams wouldn't even touch top 8.
I think the meta also, it was quite interesting to see after the merge. We had some teams going for some really, really fast lineups, but they also kind of failed then on a European server. They were just expecting a bit too much there from their setups. And I think both sides adjusted to each other, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the case.
Yeah.
I think also a lot of let's just call them Russian teams. It was the Russian server. They came over and they thought the European server would be easier than theirs. And I think they were proven wrong. Because I think they took things a bit too lightly maybe coming over. And they thought it would be really easy to push over teams, but it wasn't. So, I mean, you know when B-Love, like the G-Game core, they came over, like they played a really slow, super heavy play style. Despite being a Russian team, like they'd be the team to take like 6 super heavies and go one side of the map. And then like one light, and then, yeah, they just play for points and they hold. So, I mean, obviously not all the Russian teams are aggressive and fast mobile teams.
Yeah. I think that worked really well then, that B-Lab just decided to not go that light and they were just going for some safe strategies. And it's often also a bit of the thing that some teams try to just play the safest way possible, and others try to beat that and try to reinvent the gameplay, basically. How have you found yourself in that question in the past?
I mean, if you can't win playing the game style that's the main like style on the server, then you have to kind of reinvent the game. That's the thing. Like you have to try something, because if you can't beat someone at their own game, then you need to figure out a way to beat them. Like let's say you play against a team who's very good at taking bases, holding, basically unbeatable in those slow like 5-minute games where they can just play by points. Then you need to figure out a way how to make the games faster and force them to move. So, I mean, of course, I've also had like try to evolve the game with my team. And I mean, you've seen other teams have also like just kind of evolved the entire game style in certain seasons.
Yep.
I think one team that's really evolved things lately is APA. The way they take their like fast, aggressive map control without much risk. Like you'll see that in the start of the game, they spread out, but they don't really risk anything. You see, they never like lose a tank in the first minute and lose games because of that. Like they're able to take the map away from you and still remain safe. And I think that's like a kind of reinvention, I would say, for the EU server anyways.
Yeah, that's actually kind of crazy how they are getting really aggressive at the start, mostly at the center of the map, and still play so safe that it's almost impossible to push in.
Yeah, like it's really hard to punish them. Like you see the games, they rarely get punished at all for what they do, even though they're very aggressive. Like sometimes they can send like 4 or 5 tanks down the middle, then 1 tank left, 1 tank right, and those tanks still like play safe enough to not get caught out, not get pushed. I think it's really hard to be able to take this kind of control, and I think that's why they're the best team and have been for a while now. Because no other team has really figured out how to play like that or how to play against it effectively.
Sometimes it gets close, but still in the end, API often has a bit of an advantage there.
Yeah, like the final against Lossib, like they were taken to tiebreaker, but you know they still come out on top. And I think APA had a bad day. I think normally they win that final a lot easier. I would say they had a bad day because I think they were stronger than they looked in the finals for sure at other parts of the season.
Especially the first games that they played there against Lucy was just no chance. And later on they dragged behind a bit more. But another example that I could see there is when BPS played with the LT meta, they just came up with the idea of just, instead of playing heavy, they were just going for 2 heavies only and playing 5 200 LTs.
Yep.
And in the end, almost all teams adjusted to that, and almost all teams copied the play style. Not entirely, but at least took 3 or 4 light tanks instead of only 1 or 2 then.
And yeah, that was also a huge revolution.
Yeah,
like that was a unique playstyle. Like that was the first time that's ever been played on EU. Like this aggressive with that many lights. Like, you know, they'd spread all across the map, play really aggressively, and then they just use their heavies to just kind of send them down the middle and take strong holding positions in the center. Like I remember they played like double I7, double concepts, and they just played them really aggressively, like hull down, just so they're aggressive enough to like be close to the enemy and spot them, but not aggressive enough to just get pushed and die. So I think that was like one of the, like by strats, one of the best seasons ever played on EU by any team, like by like game understanding, because I don't think any other team really was able to even contest in that game style.
No, the others were just absolutely struggling to come up with the same thing and could not push in with the heavies because the light tanks were running away, could not take light tanks to do the same thing because they did not fully grasp what the enemies were doing. So that was definitely very interesting to see there. Let's maybe come to a rather final question here. What do you feel like are your personal goals for tournaments still, and also how do you see the tournament scene in the future?
I think the scene is going to get bigger. I have a feeling that next year is going to be a really big year. I mean, already this year we had the summer season, which was by prize pool the largest season ever. I think the EU prize pool amounted to $120,000. So I think it's only going to go up from here, honestly. A lot of people are pessimistic. Like they think that, I mean, I've heard that Wood Blitz is dying for 5 years now, which is evidently not true.
Basically since I started as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to keep growing. I think we're heading in the right direction. And I think next year is going to be a really good year. Personally, for me, I think the absolute goal would be to play another offline if they ever come back. I hope they do so. That was definitely the peak of this game for me, being invited to an offline, traveling to the US to play. That was amazing. So another experience like that is why I'm around still. And obviously now the money is also quite good. Like back then, you didn't really make much. Even if you won a season, you made maybe like 1,000. But now if you win one of those like major seasons, you can make 5,000-6,000, and that's good money. That's good money for a hobby.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Anyone's gonna take that if they have the chance. So.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, obviously I still want to win. I want to stay on top. That's why I still play, and hopefully we're able to show a better game than what we did last season. Or not a season, but the last tournament that was played just like a week ago was a disappointment for us. But hopefully we can get our revenge in the upcoming one at the end of this month.
I definitely did not lose your fun in it because of one bad season.
No, definitely not. I'm just more hyped to, prove people wrong and show that we're still one of the best teams.
Yeah, that's a good approach to it, to not be dragged down too much. I think we got it. So thanks a lot.
I think so. Yeah, thank you too, man. It's a pleasure.